Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. With me today, Representatives Tim Reich and John Mills and Senator Casey Crabtree. I want to start off by saying I want to give a little shout out to Ms. Nash in Arlington at the school. I'm at a fourth grade basketball tournament, and she was nice enough to, in between our games, open up a room for me so that we're able to still hold the Cracker Barrel this morning. I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of start off. Senator Crabtree, if you want to kind of lead us off and just talk about some things that you've been working on at your time in Pierre this year.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thanks to the Chamber for hosting us today. I appreciate the work you do in the surrounding area and what that does for our businesses and our quality of life here. I understand how you feel being at a fourth grade basketball tournament. As soon as we wrap up today, I will be at a sixth grade basketball tournament. So I know how you feel there, and I'm looking forward to that as well. So a couple of things that we're working on in Pierre. Things have been productive, and we've been focused overall on making sure we've got safe communities and economic strength here in South Dakota. And my role in the legislature is I chair Senate State Affairs. I'm a member of Senate Commerce and Energy, and my colleagues elected me as a Senate Majority Leader. And so very focused on things that are good for District 8, but get involved in many of the things that are good for South Dakota overall with my colleagues. And so a couple of things that I just mentioned right away is as we're looking at things lately or this week, the governor signed in an E15 incentive bill in our area. Corn growers are everywhere, and ethanol is where 64% of our corn goes. It supports 11,000 farms in South Dakota and 30,000 jobs. And so to see some of our homegrown fuels staying closer to home is a great deal. And it saves consumers money at the pump. And so that was something that was good this week. And then we'll talk about a little bit about revenue estimates. Representative Mills serves on appropriations. I'm sure he'll talk about that as well. One of the things that I liked about that is things are setting up good. We can stay focused on our priorities, but it also looks like we're going to be able to have a good discussion about tuition freezes. What I think is great about that is that keeps our kids and our grandkids here in South Dakota. That makes sure that they can get the best quality of education at an affordable rate. And that saves those kids dollars. That saves their moms and dads money. It strengthens our economy. And you know what? The best part is then they'll stay here, raise their kids here, and enjoy the quality of life that we want them to here in South Dakota. And so that'll be a big discussion over the next couple of weeks. And I look forward to having that with my colleagues. And with that, I'll turn it over to the two House members.
Let's go, Representative Reich.
Okay, thanks. I thought you were going to go with the experienced, distinguished-looking gentleman from Volga there, but I'll go. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity, Eric, and Madison, Greater Madison Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. I serve on the Education and Judiciary Committees on a regular basis, and then as needed on the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. In education, we get a lot of bills. People got a lot of ideas what they want to do as it relates to education, both K-12, and then we also get some of the higher education, technical education bills that we get to weigh in there and in House Education. The big one we worked on here this last week was teacher pay bill. As you can probably remember, if you watched the governor's State of the State address, she kind of previewed the bill. It was House Bill 1048 that she wanted to run, and some people have referred to it as a teacher pay accountability bill and other things. And there's been some pushback, from the education groups, from the superintendents and others about is this thing really doable? Well, it's been amended, and it's been amended again, and it's going to be on the House floor for voting on next week. Well, it looks a lot different than it did when the governor introduced it. Right now, we're down to a $45,000 minimum pay for full-time K-12 school teachers. And at one time, it was $48,000. That would have left a lot of school districts scrambling to get there. And then the other component of it is total teacher compensation package. That starts at the rate that the average package is right now for each of the school districts. And then it would be required, just like the minimum teacher salary, to be adjusted upward at the same percentage rate of state education, whatever the legislature pushes forward for state aid to education. If it's a 2% increase or 3 or 4, or in rare cases, it's a decrease. That would apply to that moving average teacher compensation package and the minimum teacher salary. And so I've sought a lot of input from, we've got 11 school districts in District 8. And so I reached out and just tried to get a sense of what they can live with there, because education is a very important thing for our future. In judiciary, we get a lot of bills in judiciary. Everybody wants to send them to prison longer, and being an old sheriff, sometimes they think that I would naturally vote for a bill that would do that, but I don't in all cases, because I did run the prison system and was responsible for parole and juvenile corrections as well. And so I think there's a number of lenses you can look through on those sorts of increased penalties for criminal behavior. We've also got this prison thing hanging out there. And I know Representative Mills is working on it for the Probst Committee and for the caucus, on just kind of trying to distill down how much is this thing going to cost us. Irrespective of where it gets built, I think everybody acknowledges the fact that we've outgrown and this outdated prison that we built back before statehood. And it's served us well, and we've gotten a lot of miles out of it, but it's time to move on. And so that's going to be a discussion for not only this year, last year, and this year, and next year, how much we're going to spend on it, where it's going to be built, and all those sorts of things. And of course, the whole legislature will have input to that. And so appreciate again the opportunity to participate this morning.
Thank you. Representative Mills.
Good morning, Eric. It's good to see you and my colleagues on the screen this morning, and to know that basketball games can be interrupted. If you hear some background noise, I'm expecting a couple of grandkids to show up this morning along with their mom. And so if you hear that, that's what's going on at my house today. In Pierre, as was mentioned, I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and this past week, our House Chair liked to refer to it as the Super Bowl of appropriations, where we set the revenue targets both for the current fiscal year, which ends on June 30th, and also for the new fiscal year, which will start on July 1st. It's a very interesting process. The Legislative Research Council that supports the legislature has fiscal analysts, a team of fiscal analysts, as does the Bureau of Finance and Management that's part of the administration. And they both present their projections to the committee in great detail. A lot of questions get asked. And then a subcommittee of the appropriations group meets separately, dials in on those numbers, and picks a target that they believe in. This year it was kind of interesting. Quite often those two are a fair distance apart on their estimates, but this particular year they were quite close together. And so I think in that way it was easier to say, okay, we agree with you, and we'll split the difference here. And anyway, we ended up with a budget that looks good, should be balanced at the end of June, and we'll start off in good shape for the coming year. It is going to allow us to do some things. We're going to be able to fund some projects with what we call one-time money, and both in the House and I'm sure in the Senate as well, we're reviewing lists of potential uses for those funds and having discussions about what are the priorities. So I think that's kind of my brief appropriations outlook. Overall, I would say it's very healthy, and I think we've all talked about that it's more of a return to normal. We're not going to have any of these 14-15% changes this year. I would say just a little bit of a lot of my work this year has been focused on the county funding. I served on that interim committee, and I know it's a big deal in Lake County, particularly. Was pleased to sponsor a resolution that did get passed that will ask our federal delegation, Thune, Rounds, and Johnson, to amend what's called the PILT Act, Payment in Lieu of Taxes Act, that will add in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife lands, and that'll make a difference for our counties. Should they do that, it'll bring in some extra money. Also, I mentioned in my article last week about House Bill 1216, and I put a little teaser in there, both for Representative Reich and Senator Crabtree, that I won't be around next year in the legislature. I hope somebody picks it up, the idea, and at least I hope they will listen to that at some point and give it thought, because basically that idea is that I think the counties, the cities, and the schools should have a share in the surpluses that we have each year in the state government. They have done a big part of helping us produce that success, because, in fact, even things like you're at today, Eric, a basketball tournament is an economic generator that benefits our state. And so, from my view, the schools that put those on, or the counties that help support a 4-H event, they should get some of those monies. So that's what House Bill 1216 would have done. It did die in committee, but I could tell by reading the room that there was interest in the idea. So I hope my colleagues will pick that up next year. And then finally, Representative Reich mentioned the prisons, and I have been focused a lot on that lately. With my background in construction, I've been dialing in on that project in particular, but others too, trying to help the state be wise and frugal. And in regard to the prisons, I believe that we may have more money set aside than we need. And so there'll be some discussion about that. If my colleagues come along and agree with that assessment, we may free up some additional one-time dollars. That would be really helpful for some things, whether that's tuition buy down, as Senator Crabtree mentioned, or something else. So I'm working hard at that, and hopefully we'll see some results. So thank you very much.
Sure, I'll jump in and say we did receive, probably 22, 23 questions ahead of time. I'll try and combine some of the questions that are like topics. We probably won't get to all of the questions that were submitted, keeping the hour time frame. But let's start off with questions concerning House Bill 1042, which would establish parameters for the reimbursement of school districts that provide free and reduced price meals to students. And Representative Reich and Mills, if you just kind of want to talk about House Bill 1042 and how and why you voted the way you voted for that bill. Let's start, since Representative Mills just finished. Representative Reich, I'll let you go first.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Well, we had two those similar bills, school lunch supplement bills, I guess, that went through House Education. And I don't remember the number. We have 500 bills rolled around there, so I don't remember all the numbers. But I voted the same way on both, and I'll tell you why. The first bill that came through would have taken a little over $500,000 in state general fund dollars, and used it to expand on the federal school lunch program, so that if students qualified for reduced lunch, they would have gotten their lunches free, and the state would have made up the difference in those cases. That was about a $500,000 price tag on that. And, we talk about a lot of things. When you're in committee, you get to ask a lot of questions, and you get the proponents and the opponents come up, and they kind of try to present the information in a way that would help them get their way on a bill. And so you learn a lot of information that maybe isn't even addressed in the bill. One of the problems we have is that some families that qualify for reduced lunch don't fill out the simple paperwork to get it. This bill wouldn't do a thing really to address that. And I just think, as I talked about in one of my columns, that I just think it's a dangerous path to go down for states to start picking federal programs and say, you know what, let's throw some state money behind this too. And I was very clear about that. It just, all the money that the federal government wastes, we've got $34 trillion with debt. Um, I say the federal government never saw a giveaway program that they didn't love. And it's costing us and our kids and our grandkids in perpetuity. This country is in trouble financially. So we don't want the state to do that. That's why I voted against the first version of the bill. The second version of the bill would have gone farther, and it was over $1.5 million that would have been asking for. And I just am not willing to go down that path, I guess, is rather than belabor the point. If this is a federal program that needs to be expanded, then I would ask the federal government to borrow some more money and expand it, but I don't want the state to have to do it.
Thank you. Representative Mills, your thoughts on House Bill 1042?
So it didn't ring a bell when you said that number, so I just looked it up and I see that it actually it didn't make it to the House floor, I don't believe. What jumped in my mind was the bill we had that wanted the state to pick up the cost that the schools have when a student doesn't pay for their lunch. And I wondered if that might be one of the bills that was being considered as well. In that case, I had conversations with a couple of the districts, school districts in District 8, and was pleased to learn that they have an angel fund, they call it, supported by local folks or churches who kind of fill that gap at the end of the year and say, okay, we had some kids who couldn't afford their lunches, we'll take care of it. And I personally love that model where citizens and charities are engaged to help people. So that's why I didn't want the state to jump into that role. I agree with Representative Reich on the rest of his answer, and thankful that he's in that committee dealing with that one.
Senator Crabtree, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that topic. I don't know if anything made it over to the Senate yet in terms of school lunches.
We have not seen that on the Senate side, and maybe it's worth just offering a couple of things, Eric, to the folks that are listening about how the process kind of works. We saw over 450 bills that are out there in Peer this year. Most of us are very focused on the ones that are in our committees, those types of things. So when we see House bills, the senators are working diligently and being thoughtful on the work on the Senate side. We don't necessarily take a look at everyone that's on the House side till it arrives. And so that's kind of the general process for how all of us work. Certainly there's ones that we're paying attention that we might be working on our side, but in general on those things. And the reason is as it starts in a House committee, it goes into a House committee in a certain form. It may change in that form and be amended. Then that would go to the floor, and 70 members over there debate it, and it may change again before it arrives over on our side. So we may pay attention to them, but we don't study them super close until we see them in their final form arrive in the Senate.
Okay, next question. I think we'll start with Representative Mills. This is targeted right at District 8. What infrastructure improvements do the representatives of District 8 imagine being fiscally possible?
I'm not sure what's on our agenda, what bills might be out there that would be in that realm. That seems like kind of a general question. And so I have to apologize, Eric, and to the folks that I can't, my brain is spinning going, well, what infrastructure projects? Obviously, we care a lot about our roads and our bridges. I think over the previous years, we've done some things to send some money to the counties to do an inventory for county and township structures. We've allocated funds for that. There's always a care about that. I think we're in much better shape today than we were even just a few years ago in that regard, at least in terms of providing those resources for our district. That's maybe the biggest thing that comes to mind at this point in time, and hopefully my colleagues will have some deeper thoughts to share.
Senator Crabtree, any ideas or thoughts on infrastructure improvements?
Yeah, I'd add a couple, and I think Representative Mills brought up one that is worth noting. He discussed what when he was talking about funds and the study going back to those counties, he's talking about the rural access infrastructure funds. That is a bill that I worked on a couple years ago, and in total, I think that's been about a little over $50 million that's come back for us to study our infrastructure, make improvements on some of those. Small structures that are in our townships and our counties. We have made some recent changes to that policy to make sure that that our counties and our townships can use that efficiently and effectively, and that's been based off of feedback from those local governments. And so we'll see policy-wise that way. When it comes to dollars, I think what should be brought up is the ARPA funds that remain. So Senate Commerce and Energy moved those through on a policy basis over to joint appropriations. So that sits between joint appropriations is a committee made up of our House members on the appropriations, such as Representative Mills, and our Senate members that are on appropriations. And so that is over there. That's about $95 million, and that is for water and wastewater infrastructure improvements. And so that debate will happen now with our joint appropriators as they go through that. That goes through the water board and then is dispersed out from there. Those funds are able to be used from everybody from rural water to our cities as they have water and wastewater needs. And so over the course of the last couple of years, we had $600 million of the ARPA funds go into that process. And for those who don't follow the jargon, ARPA is basically COVID relief dollars that flowed through the states from DC. And so that went into water and wastewater projects that is currently being used across our state. And then this 95 million, when you invest one-time money like that into something that's infrastructure that'll give us a continuous return, I think that's a good investment for the people of South Dakota. One-time investments with return that also make sure that we don't have an ongoing tax burden for our taxpayers. So I think that's a good policy we have. I look forward to our joint appropriators having that discussion further, and we'll probably see that heat up here in the next couple of weeks as those guys wrap up what's going to be a balanced budget that the people of South Dakota can be proud of.
Representative Reich, anything to add for infrastructure improvements for District 8?
I think my colleagues covered it pretty well. I think that both of them touched on the infrastructure in the purest sense of the form. I guess the one thing I would add is that, you know, if the person who asked the question talked about, when they talk about district specific, that almost kind of sounds like local projects, and that would fall into probably a little different category. Might be worth just touching on. One of the things that the House and the Senate are both doing in their caucuses are reviewing a long list of projects for one-time money, and there will be a later look at ongoing dollar requirements for things that individual legislators have brought a piece of legislation for in their district. A couple of examples that are out there this year is repairing some dams, you know, across the state, different locations, none in our district this year. But if that's what the person who posed the question is asking, we don't really have anything like that for District 8 this year. Those are tough sledding deals. You know, when we look at the state dollars that come in, and then we review an individual legislator's bill that would grab state dollars and bring it right into their district, those are really tough sledding deals. Not to say that they can't pass, but ordinarily the legislature likes to see a lot of local effort done up front, and to raise some money to kind of help show some commitment on the part of the community. Not infrastructure in the purest sense, but just kind of a little talk about kind of how some of those district centric projects might be weighed.
All right, let's move to Senate Bill 201, this is for Senator Crabtree. And I guess if the representatives have comments, we can certainly open it up to them. But specifically for Senate Bill 201, which is the Summit Carbon Solutions Pipeline. Question that was submitted, I'll kind of combine two questions here. If a landowner or farmer does not want to sign an easement with Summit Carbon Solutions, why should eminent domain be forced upon them when the item being carried in the pipeline is neither a commodity nor a product of public use? And then the follow-up question is, with the representatives being landowners, would you be interested in swapping land for somebody that the pipeline is going to be running through? So Senator Crabtree, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a little bit of a background on the overall project for those who aren't following it that closely. What is being talked about is a CO2 sequestration pipeline that runs through multiple states: Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota. The policy behind it is something that stretches back to honestly, it's under George W. Bush, who is where the tax credit comes from, accelerated by President Trump, and then also President Biden. So it's a long time bipartisan effort from Washington, D.C. And I don't think you don't have to agree with that policy. I don't think I agree with that policy. But my grandma was a really good card player, Eric, and she taught me you play the cards that you're dealt. And so that policy exists out there. When you look at what the pipeline does, you don't have to like the pipeline. What you do have to like, though, is what it does for our corn growers. And that's why you see so many of these ag groups that are involved in this project now, because they see the benefit to the folks, the family farmers who grow corn on their land, what that means to them in the future for them as far as price per bushel and access to new markets, and what it means to our ethanol industry going forward. And so, just to give you an idea of where ethanol is, every out of 3 rows of corn in South Dakota, 2 of them are going to the ethanol industry. And so that's the market where we sell our corn the most. And, when you look at the investment because of the pipeline up in Gevo, which is Kingsbury County, where I was raised, that is $1 billion investment that'll put 100 people to work. And I think the big thing is when we talk about the corn grower, we're talking about $1.80 difference per bushel for those corn growers. That's why those landowners in that area are so excited about it. And so when you look at our district in particular, 93% of the affected landowners have voluntarily signed those easements. 75% of the total project pipeline is signed up voluntarily. And I want 100% of them signed up voluntarily. And so when you look at what House Leader Will Mortensen and myself have been working on through the summer and the fall and up till now in the session, I was working with a wide range of stakeholders to make sure we have input from everybody to make sure that we're making a policy that gives a South Dakota way forward while also making sure that we've got some of the best landowner reforms in the country. And I think the policies we have out in front of us do. What we're wanting to do is make sure that we've got, respect and fairness for the landowner. And we have to have certainty when it comes to value-added agriculture and infrastructure in general. One of those pieces of that is Senate Bill 201. It's combined with House Bill 1185 and House Bill 1186. House Bill 1185 and 1186 are 2 that Will is sponsoring on the House side, and I'm prime sponsor on the Senate side. Those are landowner reforms when it comes to access, when it comes to surveying ground, and also comes to landowner payments. On Senate Bill 201, as you asked, Senate Bill 201 discusses setbacks, and it also discusses 5 more landowner reforms that are beneficial for the landowner. Now, we'll take the first thing, which is setbacks. The setbacks in 201 change nothing for Lake County, Kingsbury County, or Minor County. These of all the counties that this crosses, only a few in South Dakota attempted to change what those setbacks were in the middle of those projects. in the country, there's 5,400 miles of CO2 pipeline that crosses 120 counties. Some of those have been operating safely for over 30 years. And so when we're talking about setbacks, we're talking about safety. And when you do that, when you change that, it is clear the federal guidelines do not allow you to do so. There has only been 2 counties that have recently tried to change the setbacks. Both of those were overturned in federal court, and we're in the same circuit as those are. So we know the setback piece isn't something that we can adjust. We know the feds have that jurisdiction. So when we know that, we can agree to that piece, and then what we can do is move on to making sure that we get these other 5 landowner reforms that cover everything from safety for the landowner, for indemnity, for production when it comes to their drain tile. And I think the other thing that is interesting that certainly folks around here will be interested to know is that in addition to the property tax that pipeline would normally pay, there is also $1 per foot that goes on top of that the pipeline operator would have to pay. So that's about $3.5 million a year in extra revenue back to those counties. That's $42 million over the life of that project. That really those counties can use for whatever. It might be critical infrastructure, might be safety. My personal hope is they use it for property tax reduction for those landowners. And so that's a little bit about what 201 does. Senate Bill 201 was heard in Senate Commerce and Energy on Thursday. It passed 7-2, and it'll be on the floor of the Senate this week.
Representative Reich, Representative Mills, anything to add on the carbon pipeline topic?
If you're looking for a counterpoint, I could provide that. Senate Bill 201 really is focused on removing local control, taking it away from the counties, the townships, and the state. The hearing was, I think, Thursday in Pierre, the committee hearing that the senator mentioned. The place was buzzing with people. I didn't have an opportunity to attend the hearing, but I did listen to it last night. It was pretty interesting. The testifiers in favor of the bill were almost all lawyers and lobbyists, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. On the opponent side, it was county commissioners, township supervisors, and citizens opposed to the bill, wanting us to maintain local control. As the senator mentioned, he talked a little bit about safety and the amount of pipes that there are, pipeline mileage there is of CO2 pipeline, and I think safety is like the primary responsibility of government at all levels. State government, local government, county government. That's why we put resources into our police departments, our sheriff's departments, our highway patrol. Safety is critical. We have, EMS, we have firefighters. Safety is government's job number 1, and it really does start at the local level. And I think Senate Bill 201 removes that. And we heard some testimony on the bill, if you listen to it, and I encourage you to do that, from Brown County, which is one of the ones that's increased their setbacks, to why they need to do that. The line up there would parallel Highway 12 and damage economic development in the future, because you can't build anywhere close to these pipelines because they are dangerous. One of my real concerns is that these pipelines are going to originate at every ethanol plant we have in the state. A lot of those ethanol plants are right next to a town. I think of Aurora, I think of Watertown, even in Wentworth. It's not far away. If I lived on the lake or near that one, I'd be very concerned. There was an eruption down in Mississippi that hurt a lot of people. They're still suffering from that. And as this pipeline works its way across our state, it gets bigger and more dangerous. people die, or people will die at some point in time. And I just have real concerns about this. I think it's actually a terrorist target. Once it gets built, it'll be easy to sabotage. It's only 4 feet down, and you could go out there with a shovel and in about 20 minutes be down to that pipe. And I just think there's so many layers to the safety issue of this that we need to let our counties and our local governments decide what they're comfortable with. And so Senate Bill 201 would take all that away and replace it with a state solution. So I could talk. I imagine the senator could talk for half a day. We would never agree on this one, and that's okay. We'll work on it and keep chewing on it and see what happens. But thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Mills. Representative Reich, anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd throw another piece in here, not specifically about 201 or 1185 or 1186. I think people know where they're at on those bills. My position really is largely for the corn farmer, for the ethanol industry. Before we got on this morning, I looked up the price of corn in Howard, South Dakota, $3.72 a bushel this morning, minus a 45-cent a bushel basis. That's down 35 cents just since the first of the year. 35 cents since the first of the year. Soybeans are down 96 cents a bushel since the first of the year. There's really no money for the farmers at these prices. You're not going to make much money selling your corn at $3 a bushel. And if the ethanol industry goes in the tank, which I think it's at risk here, certainly, because the outlets for ethanol are going to be pinched down as these environmental requirements that the federal government has placed on us continue to be enhanced. And we're going to choke out an industry that, as the senator said, takes 2/3 of our corn crop. And it's not just the farmers. The farmers, one thing you love about a farmer, when they make money, they come into town and spend it. They buy new pickups and new trucks, tractors, combines. That money goes all the way around our community. We've got to move on. We've got to face the realities that our world is changing. Do I like pipelines going across property? No. I think the person that asked the question said, would you like to switch places with somebody who's got land that the pipeline goes on? I own land, got a pipeline that goes across it, and I owned it when they put the pipeline across it. It's an oil pipeline, but I've been through the process. I was treated fairly, and it's probably part of the reason why 94% of the people in our district have kind of felt the same way, that the landowners in the path of this pipeline. So I think that's something we really need to think about, because I think there's been some exaggerations, not by Representative Mills, but there's rhetoric on both sides of this thing. And there probably been some bad actors. As I understand, maybe the Navigator pipeline people were a little more direct, and I certainly wouldn't condone that. When you own land, it's a precious thing, and you should be treated fairly. And that's, I think, what a couple of these bills really do. They certainly enhance the treatment of land. 1185, requires a 30-day notice before anybody comes on the line. You got to provide the information, who's coming on there, what their contact information. There's a payment to the landowner for their inconvenience of $500. These are all little enhancements. Are they huge deals? No, but they're just an improvement. And I think I think when you got two sides that are really struggling, it's incumbent on both sides to come together. And I think that's what these bills kind of do this year. It's already been talked about, the taxes. Kingsbury County could get $1 million a year from the pipeline tax and $1 million from GEVO. We sure don't want to see GEVO go, and they've been very public. If they can't hook up to a CO2 pipeline, they're not going to build, and that's in our district. And that's certainly something that weighs heavily on my mind. So that's where I'm at on it.
Got a couple other things on that, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to the the economic side of this. First is that I was really pleased that the senator brought the bill on E15, and I was happy to support that. I think that's the right way to go. I actually think that that's where ethanol ought to be focused. And in Washington, D.C., that's where the ethanol lobby is focused, trying to get E30. That would do far more for our farmers and the price of corn than this dangerous pipeline would ever do. So I really think there are alternatives. And one of the ones I'm excited about, and I mentioned it in one of my articles, was that South Dakota School of Mines, one of our very own schools, has invented a process, and they actually have applied for a patent that will turn carbon dioxide into rock, into aggregate. And what a better solution that would be than a dangerous pipeline. We might have, if we're patient and wait, we could turn this CO2, which some people think is bad. I personally don't, but if we could turn it into aggregate and do it right at the source. So I can envision every ethanol plant or GEVO or whatever having an aggregate stockpile right next to the system that is supplying gravel for the roads and aggregate for the concrete, and no pipeline is needed. We just need to be patient and let the smart people in our state, especially our young people who are inventing things, we need to let them find this solution and not shove this pipeline through people's land who don't want it, and put them at high risk of life and property. So I wanted to add a little bit more to that counterpoint. Thank you for letting me do that. We probably could spend this whole hour on the pipeline, and we wouldn't be done, would we?
Eric, I'd jump in and just say, when you talk about the process, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And so Representative Mills and I have had many discussions as we work towards solutions. And so, as he mentioned, we probably don't agree on this. And just a couple of things in summary, and I know you got other questions, but pipelines are 99.992% safer for moving material than any other mode. And so we know, and ethanol's told us already, they're going to capture this. So they're either going to run this down the road in tankers, or they're going to move it through that, which we know is safer. And when we talk about safety here with pipelines, here's some lifetime odds that I find kind of interesting. When it comes to heart disease, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of dying because of that. Cancer is 1 in 7. Vehicle crash is 1 in 93. Drowning or falling into a swimming pool is 1 in 5,186. A flood is 1 in 45,908. A hornet, wasp, or bee sting is 1 in 54,516. A pipeline leak or damage to that is so rare, it's lower than the chances of being struck by lightning. And so, although we disagree on this, we'll continue to work to make sure we have a South Dakota path forward.
What was the swimming one? What was the stats on the swimming one?
Drowning or falling into a swimming pool is 1 in 5,186.
It'd be 1 in 1 for me because I can't swim.
Well, and we haven't outlawed swimming either. So.
And like all three of you have said, we could spend half a day, probably more, on the pipeline discussion. But we do have other topics that constituents submitted questions on. So I think we'll move on to another House bill, House Bill 1178, which would prohibit Board of Regents institutions from using state resources for obscene live conduct. Are you concerned that DSU was using state resources for obscene live conduct, and who decides what constitutes obscene live conduct? I think we'll start with Representative Reich on thoughts and comments on House Bill 1178 as it relates to DSU, and who decides what's obscene live conduct.
Well, thanks, Eric. Well, I'm certainly not concerned that DSU is using state money to host events that would fall into the definition of obscene live conduct. But these laws are being passed for the whole state. I think it's in statute what the statutory definition of obscene live conduct is. You know, every year you have some bills that don't seem like they go away. Maybe they come back. Maybe they get passed the previous year, get another version of them the next year. We've got some bills that come through education on appropriate or inappropriate books. That's a hot topic. Who's to decide what books should go in a school library? How do you as a parent get to weigh in on that? What are the responsibilities of free speech? What is the school board's responsibilities? What's a good policy? What's a bad policy? You know, there are just all sorts of tentacles that kind of go out from legislation like this. And I can remember specifically a bill last year that had to do with books. And the free speech people, you know, were definitely against this book or this bill. I don't remember what the number of it is. I can't remember the number of most of this year's 500 bills. But when you read the wording in the bill, there was no way I could vote against that bill. And every one of these bills is a little bit different. And I don't think people bring bills necessarily for specific items. And I think in a lot of cases, legislators are discouraged from bringing a bill that addresses a singular local issue. That's a good reason to kill a bill. I was told that early on, not necessarily about one of my bills, but maybe it was, quite frankly. So I just think that we can err on the safe side. You know, I got kids, I got grandkids. I want them to be raised. I mean, look at what they're subjected to just watching TV now. We're not going in the right direction here. And so I think if a legislator brings a bill, and I think that one passed like 59-8 or something on the House floor, I voted in favor. I hope they stop bringing these bills, but I think if we continue to go down the path in society that exposes our children to harmful sorts of behavior, then we're going to have to continue to, I think, consider these bills. And I voted in favor of that bill.
Representative Mills, thoughts on House Bill 1178?
Sure. Well, I also voted for it. I think it's a good bill. It comes about because of an event that was held at SDSU a year or two ago, a drag show that sounded rather provocative, and yet the advertisement for it was family friendly. Bring your kids, and it said bring your $1 and $5 bills to tip the performers. And so that was the genesis of why this got started. As a result of that, I think maybe I can summarize this fairly quickly. There was a bill on that idea that to stop that a year or two ago that didn't get through, but the Board of Regents took some action on their own, and they instituted a policy to prevent these kind of things from happening. And this bill 1178 really is, and in fact, I think the sponsor said it was the exact language. He took the Board of Regents language that's already in their policy, which would apply to DSU as well as all of our universities, and just put it into law, just so that it's more solid, more just put it into law and protect kids. And I was happy to vote for this one.
I guess for the follow-up question, do we have any guidelines on who I guess decides what is obscene live conduct? I don't know the answer. That's why I'm just asking. And maybe that's something that needs to be worked out yet.
I think in the bill, I'm just glancing at the bill, it talks about if a lawsuit is brought, that the Attorney General is brought in to represent the entity or the individual, and it says without charge. So it's kind of saying the state's gonna be there if you've got a complaint, and if it's legitimate enough that you can get the Attorney General to agree with you, they'll take it on for you. So I think it's just a deterrent more than anything, and will be monitored by folks who are close and care.
Eric, I'd just add that, on the previous question, we certainly had some disagreement. On this question, we do not. And kudos to my two representatives for their work on this and the answers they just gave. I don't think we should ever apologize for being careful and protecting our next generation of kids. And certainly when that comes to situations that are on facilities that are taxpayer funded, we must be careful with that. And so kudos to those. Like I said before, that is going to be in Senate State Affairs, and I plan on supporting that. I expect that to move through Senate State Affairs quickly and then onto our Senate floor here in the coming week.
All right. Next question, and we've got about 10 minutes left here of our hour. And I think we'll start with Representative Mills. I think it's your chance to go first here. Do you see the crisis at the southern border as a South Dakota issue?
Thanks for the question. I think the crisis at the southern border is a United States issue, and that includes South Dakota. It absolutely is affecting us. I know our senator's been down there. He'll talk it more in specifics of what he saw, and I've heard him speak on that before. But yeah, it's absolutely an important issue. And I'm glad we're engaged in the conversation, and hopefully our delegation out in Washington, D.C. understands and is doing all they can to push for solutions. It's just so frustrating to know what's going on, to see the images, and to know, in fact, that some of the drugs and the things that are coming across that border and pouring across do end up in South Dakota. Our reservations, I think, are kind of sanctuaries in a way for some of that, and yet it filters out across the whole state. So yeah, it's absolutely an important issue for every South Dakotan, I hope, and for all of America.
Senator Crabtree?
Yeah, I'll gladly jump in on that. I don't think there's probably any disagreement amongst us on this either. I have had the opportunity to go down there and see this firsthand, and it is extremely frustrating, Eric, to know that the United States could stop this in one day if we had the willpower to do so. And now I want to just tell you, when you go down and you see this, what you see is heartbreak on both sides of the border. We have cartels that are running drugs and human trafficking at their leisure across that border in massive amounts. And you don't think it's the South Dakota border or a South Dakota issue because we're so far away, but that is in one day's travel that gets here. And so we know that all the fentanyl that's coming into this country is coming across that southern border. We know it's coming from China. And just in the week I was there, they caught 109 pounds of fentanyl. That's not even counting the many folks that got away with it. And that's enough to kill everybody in this state numbers of times over. And so when we talk about protecting our kids and our grandkids, protecting that border is exactly that. It's a national security issue, and it's an issue for South Dakota. And so when the federal government won't do it, states need to band together and do what they can here. What can we do here? What have we done here? We've certainly encouraged our congressional delegation, who I think are three with Senator Thune, Senator Rounds, and Representative Johnson, have done a good job fighting for this battle here. What I will say is, in South Dakota, what can we do is we passed a bill out of the Senate already that made those who deal in fentanyl, made them very aware that South Dakota's got the toughest laws on the books for that. So if you dabble in that, be prepared to stay a long, long time here in South Dakota when you get caught by our law enforcement officers. And so I think the other thing that people need to think about at home is this. There hasn't been major reform on the border since 1985. when it comes to immigration. Now, certainly under President Trump, we had a stronger border policies. We had much less folks going back and forth. But certainly the immigration policies, the policies on the southern border are broken. They're extremely broken under President Biden. And when we look at things, I'm reminded of a quote from Senator Fred Thompson. Eric, I know you're not political, so you would probably recognize Fred Thompson as the actor from Days of Thunder. But anyways, Fred Thompson has a great quote, which is when you're talking about the border, it was tall fences, wide gates. Tall fences to protect our kids and our grandkids, our border, our national security. Wide gates, meaning a process to make sure that we can strengthen our economy when it comes to trade issues going forward. But clearly on both sides of that, that issue is broken. I've seen it firsthand. It's heartbreaking to see the fact that we could fix this, but we refuse to do so. And so I certainly hope those in DC will get after that. They'll fix that. And in the meantime, we'll do everything we can here in South Dakota to protect our kids and our grandkids.
Wasn't prepared for a Days of Thunder quote, but thank you. Representative Reich, thoughts on the southern border?
Well, I agree with my two colleagues and everything that they've said about it. It's clearly it's a national problem, and it reaches every state. I've been to the border myself. I was in a helicopter at night with night vision equipment, working with the Border Patrol. I was down there visiting troops when I was back when I was in the National Guard, and that's back when it was pretty controlled. I've been retired for almost 5 years from that job. So the level of illegal crossings that we're experiencing right now, 300,000 in December alone, and I understand we broke that record in January. Something's got to change here, because this is just not sustainable. And I don't know where they're putting all these people. They're everywhere, right? And I think most of these folks that come here want to come to America for the right reasons. They see what we have here. They know there's jobs here. They're willing to work. And we need the workforce enhanced by immigration because of our declining work rate. But it's all the other, it's the other issues that come along with it, the drug and some folks that can easily cross that would do our country harm. And that's why it's so important. I think it's an embarrassment that we have these numbers coming over. It just shows a lack of a plan on the part of our country and the administration in Washington, D.C. And so it's everybody's problem. It's not just Texas' problem. It's America's problem. And hopefully at some point we can get back to a border policy that'll be safer for this country.
All right. Last topic here before we shut this off. Childcare. And I think everybody is aware of the childcare issue that we have going on in the state. Let's start with Senator Crabtree. Just maybe thoughts on if there's anything that the state can do to help the childcare issue.
Yeah, well, I can tell you how the Senate Republicans look at this, Eric. When you look at childcare and the issue around it, we know we've got issues. Certainly here in Madison, we hear those issues as the chamber, the LAIC, many of our employers are working towards a solution. We've seen problems in Howard, Arlington, Volga, etc. So we know there's something there. The real question is what does the state do on that? And how do we fit in it? When you look at this thing from a workforce issue, we know that's a $335 million economic impact to the state of South Dakota annually. So it's a major issue. What do we do about it as a state to fix it? It's a question. Certainly, me and many of my colleagues think parents lead the way on that, on fixing this. We think private employers lead the way on fixing this. Senator Reed, who would be from Brookings, so adjacent to us, has been working on this, who's an economic developer by trade. He had brought a bill that has some funding specifically towards gathering the data, and then the data is to be used so that our parents, our private employers can be leading the way on solutions. Subsidizing this wildly for the future is not something we can afford, and not something that I see South Dakota doing in the future. And so having the other two lead the way is ideal. I think Senator Reed's idea to get the data so that those guys can be set up, those two groups, parents and private employers, can be leading the way on the solution, is the right thing for us to do at this time. And so that bill is through Senate State Affairs, and it's over with our friends in Joint Appropriations that I explained earlier. They'll have that debate. That's about a $225,000 study overall that examines what that looks like in each one of our communities across the state. And so much to be discussed. We understand it's an issue, but we also understand that that is an issue best solved by parents and private employers and not by the state.
Representative Reich, thoughts on childcare issue?
Yep, thanks. It's a heck of an issue. I think back when I was first married and started having kids, and I was a sheriff, and sheriff didn't make much money back then. I think it was $18,000 a year is what I started out as sheriff in 1983. And you start having a few kids, you can't afford childcare. And so Ann opened a daycare in our home, and she did daycare for 20 years. And it was largely because of the costs. It just wouldn't make sense for us to take our kids to childcare from an economic standpoint. Plus, I love the fact that she was willing to take care of the kids at home. But there's just not the options anymore. Things are different in 1983 than they are now. Just from ability for one person to support a household, and it's not going in the right direction. The child care issue is a workforce issue, as the senator talked about. And at first, when I heard about the bill, I wrinkled my nose a little bit and thought, okay, well, we're going to have another study to determine the cost. Then what? But it's not until you talk and have dialogue a little bit more where you understand that it's got to be a partnership. The government's not always the answer, and I don't think that that's what they suggest with this bill. I think that maybe because it's a workforce issue, some of the employers and everybody's has got a stake in it. And so I would certainly, it's not much money in the grand scheme of things, this study, and certainly this issue is not going to go away. So I would support doing what we can to try to address the daycare issue in South Dakota, because it's not one that's to be taken lightly.
Representative Mills, on the child care issue.
This is probably an issue I could just say me too. I could tell you my personal story of when we were raising kids, and my wife and I figured out one day that she was making 50 cents an hour. And we decided, I said, you know what? Why don't you stay home and I'll work a little harder. I'll take on some extra things and we'll make this work. And we did. And one of the things I think we need to remember is that it's a window of time. Most people, if they have to step out of the workforce, it's not forever. It's just while those kids are young. But I agree wholeheartedly with both of my colleagues. This is a parents first issue. I don't know what the government role is. I'm always encouraged when churches and charities step up and become part of the solution. That's happening in my own church. I just heard there's another church in Brookings that's looking to do that, to partner with somebody who wants to do a daycare. I think those are wonderful connections. Business, I think, certainly needs to be part of the solution. And I think there's a very, very limited role of government. In terms of the bill, I always get a little nervous because studies tend to turn into asks for money and more involvement from the government. And so I'll listen to that bill carefully. I don't know where I'll vote on it at this point, but I think we're all kind of in the same quandary and feeling similar on this one.
Okay, finishing things up here, I think I'll start with Representative Reich. If you just kind of have some closing thoughts, and I'll mention too that if you would like to contact any of the District 8 legislators, all of their information's on the Legislative Research Council website. I know they always stress, make sure in your email subject lines you put District 8, and those probably get read first than the ones that don't have District 8 in the subject line. So, but just closing things up, Representative Reich, closing thoughts.
Well, just again, thanks, Eric. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity and having us the flexibility of us being able to do this from home or from the Arlington band room or wherever we may be needing to be this morning. Excited about the fact we got 6 weeks down, just 3 weeks to go. But the duties of a citizen legislator go year round. We just are away from home for these 9 straight weeks. I've really gained an appreciation for the job now. Just in my second session, you learn about how much you don't know about things, quite honestly, and it's a very educational process. One of the things that's been most pleasant is that you make a lot of friends throughout that building, and even though legislators don't agree with you on some or even most issues, we get along very well, and that's what works. That's the way government works best. If you're willing to listen to an issue and change your mind from time to time, and I have, it's been a learning process for me, and I look forward to these last 3 weeks, and then really looking forward to coming home afterwards.
Representative Mills, closing thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This has been good. I appreciate my colleagues very much. Appreciate the chamber hosting this. And I was just listening to Representative Reich, and I've worked more and gotten to know him more than Senator Crabtree over the last since I got into District 8, and really have appreciated him. He's a fine gentleman and does the work well. And I think all of us should be proud of what he's doing. I'm looking forward to supporting him on his next run for reelection. We do have 3 weeks left. We'll be looking a lot at the budget and funding things. There'll be a lot of intense debates, trying to wrap up the session. The days are long, the nights are short, and I'm just so grateful we do have a citizen legislature. We got to hang on to that. And I'm not sure what else to share other than say thank you as we kind of wind down this session, and knowing I'm not running for reelection, I definitely want to say thank you. It's been a privilege to serve, and I am looking to some time off and doing some other things, but it's been my privilege and my honor to serve, and I want to say thank you to everybody.
Closing thoughts, Senator Crabtree.
Well, thank you, Eric, and thanks for hosting this. Thanks for doing this in this manner. I know you're at a basketball tournament. I will be at one shortly, but we do know that this gets out to a number of people, and so I appreciate you guys doing this. I do want to say thank you to both my colleagues, Representative Reich, Representative Mills, especially Representative Mills. As he rides off into the sunset, he's been a good public servant. I'm glad he's going to be able to spend more time with his family and his grandkids that I know he loves dearly. And so I am thankful for all that he's done for our area over his 8 years. With the things that are coming forward, our information is everywhere, our contact information. Reach out to us anytime. We love to hear from you. We are a citizen legislature. That means that for 40 days, we come in and we work to balance our budget and pass policies that we think are best for the future of our state. And then we live under those laws. And you see us at the grocery store, at church, and in my case, at many basketball games. And so please come up to us, share the ideas that you have for tackling the toughest solutions. We know they come from you, not from the folks in Pierre. And so please reach out to us. Please communicate with us. And it is a true honor to serve District 8 and the people that call it home. And so thank you, and we look forward to seeing you.
Nope, I'll finish things up here. Thanks to our legislators for jumping on with us. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we got through a lot of the questions that were submitted ahead of time. I apologize for our technical difficulties and having to record this and post it later. But like they've all said, reach out to them. Their information can be found on the Legislative Research Council website. And again, thanks for taking the time with us. Thanks to those that submitted questions. And we will be in touch here shortly. Thank you.